Welcome to DevOps Modernization Summit from Harness. I'm joined with Martin from McKinsey, and we're extremely excited to talk about how AI is redefining DevOps. Martin, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. So I'm Martin Harrysson. I'm a senior partner with McKinsey, and I lead McKinsey's software product development practice. So we have the pleasure of working with a lot of clients on helping them improve performance in how they develop software and all aspects around it. So it's a high passion topic for me.
That's awesome. It's extremely important for us here at Harness. I think it's one of the things that we came out with back in 2018 as the first DevOps platform using AI. Back then it was predictive modeling, it wasn't generative AI, but it's been something that we've made sure that we're using the right terms and the right technology, and we're using it appropriately. So I think as we go through these conversations, I'm really excited to kind of hear your viewpoint and see what your customers are seeing. How do you see GenAI fundamentally changing the way people are doing business and how they're actually operating in the DevOps landscape?
Yeah, great question. I think AI is impacting many aspects of software development, right? So we see this as a few different shifts. I think first of all, there's a speed and velocity aspect. So AI has the ability to speed up a lot of what's often considered tedious aspects of work and toil. So, in development, this can be things around like documentation, testing, and so on. In product management, this can be things around synthesizing large amounts of user and customer data and customer research, for example. And in operations and deployment, it can be around analyzing logs, drawing out insights, and getting information on how to improve performance overall. So we see that first of all, there's a big velocity aspect of this. So we see activities speeding up across the board. Now, secondly, we think that this will. You have to view this very much as an end-to-end system, right? So if I build on this first point, like we will see AI, and we're already starting to see AI speed up a lot of specific activities across the software product development lifecycle. Now, what we're seeing less of so far is to really view this end to end, right? And so we can talk a little bit more about then the specific changes, but we really think that you have to view software development in a different lens, right? So it cannot be just using a tool to speed up certain activities, but you need to start working in different ways. You need to redefine some of the roles and what they entail, and you need to rethink your processes, right? Like if you speed up one thing, but then wait 2 weeks for the security review, just like you've always done, nothing overall is really any faster.
I think we're seeing a lot of that in the industry where, again, we'll make some minor changes and we'll start speeding up certain aspects. But to your point, those things that were previously thought of as uncompressible, those still stand in the way. Yeah. And what we found was that people actually started attacking the best part of people's jobs first. They said, hey, let's go help you write code, when in actuality, that was people's favorite thing to do. And what we're finding is that now AI that's being truly leveraged and being really used, or adopted for that matter, it's actually being used in the areas where people hate doing the work. Yeah. And so to your point, speeding those things up where I don't want to write documentation, I don't want to do extra maintenance, wait for servers to turn on and turn off when they're not supposed to, babysit deployments. And so we find that people are leveraging AI, again, not for the best part of the job, because that's what they love doing, but actually more for the worst part of the job, the things that they hate doing.
I think that's so true. And one thing I would build on that to say is that it's funny sometimes that like we have this paradigm shift a little bit to some extent in technology. But sometimes it's a little bit like we regress initially, right? So what I mean is that I think we concluded, more than a decade ago or even further back that like, counting lines of code is like not a great way to like incentivize people or view productivity. But now we see certain, some companies starting to like, as you said, like automate code generation, for example, and like actually starting to track now how much code is being generated by these AI engines. And it's having almost a little bit of an opposite effect sometimes. So you actually create now a new bottleneck. You have a lot of code generated, but you haven't perhaps like done enough to modernize your deployment. So you kind of shift the problem a little bit, right? And you feel like you're going faster, but are you actually deploying better software more often in the end, right? And I think that's not yet the case for many of our clients.
I think a lot of people will start leveraging the AIs that seem useful, seem important, that are specific to their use case. And what I think is interesting is when we go look outside of the bounds. One of the things we've talked about before is, looking at these, call them generalists, right? When we get a full stack developer, they've had to become, extremely well-versed in a lot of different things while still being experts in their field. And what I find is interesting is, we've somewhat removed some of the specialization.
Yeah.
And what I see now is that AI is actually driving back towards the specialization. Let the AI handle the things that I don't want to have to be good at. To your point, lines of code doesn't matter if I'm writing Terraform scripts. It does maybe matter if I'm building, large models and different things. And so now let those tasks be handled by AI and allow me or allow my team to focus on what they're really great at.
Yeah.
We see a different kind of state, and we see a different way people are developing software.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's sometimes I think about it a little bit almost as second order productivity is like where we need to get to. So I think we're still very much often in like first order productivity. We think we see the task and we try to speed it up, right? I think many times you need to focus perhaps more on quality and creating better artifacts and better things, right? So one example where we're seeing some of our clients have a lot of productivity impact, but it might be less intuitive at first, is even before you start coding, using AI to actually create better requirements and better acceptance criteria, and like higher quality, clearer ones that actually once they hit development, require a lot less rework, right? And some of those things have a massive productivity and also quality improvement in the end, right? But they do require you to sort of, again, think about this as a little bit more of a holistic system versus just looking at one set of activities and trying to speed that up.
I think as engineers, we always look for a faster horse or a sharper axe. And sometimes we don't step back and realize maybe instead of that axe, there's a chainsaw, or instead of a faster horse, there's a car. And what I find interesting, I think, is that, to your point, when we focus on that one area, that's okay. I think the interesting thing that you brought up is around, okay, in planning, even as a startup, being able to gather all those requirements from so many more customers, aggregate them in a meaningful way quicker, right? Time to value gets shorter. When we think about the development, sure, we're there, but even in the testing and the QA and how we can actually start, getting that feedback quicker, bringing down all of these, I think, is the goal, is to remove the bottleneck and to, I guess, be open that the bottleneck can be anywhere.
Yeah.
And let's just focus on the problem and not, point fingers and push, but let's actually leverage AI to remove those bottlenecks across the board.
Yeah. I think one other shift that we're starting to see, or even I would almost say one other aspiration that we'll see, is that I think we want our products to always be like a lot more data driven, or we always talk a lot about that. However, I think the reality is that many times, because it's sometimes complicated to like gather lots of it, it's hard to do analytics and so on. And I think especially in Silicon Valley, we sometimes have a mentality to like, let's just start doing it, like rather than like analyzing things, right? And like even if we sort of in our guts like knows that we're all engineers, so it's like it's better to actually analyze the problem first, right? So I think now an aspiration I have is that I think with AI we will actually, because we can speed up some of these tedious activities, we'll actually do a lot more of it. So what could be the result of that, right? I think a lot more, we'll be able to test a lot more ideas, right? We will shorten the cycle. Like it will allow PMs, for example, to shorten the cycle of kind of, ideate, test, validate, and kind of prototype, and that whole before you start developing, and do so a lot faster. And therefore, we should see a lot more, hopefully good ideas, like actually make it into production versus, just relying on, people's gut reaction and just kind of trial and error.
I think we all know to measure twice and cut once.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of times where I even find myself like, I'll make the cut, see where I'm at, give me a ballpark, and then we go from there. And I think to your point, we all know the best way to do it. But I think sometimes we go to our engineering roots and let's just get it done. Dig in and get it done. I think even to your earlier point, velocity is great.
Yeah.
Right. Quality is important. One of the things that a lot of people aren't looking at, we can look at velocity. So how much new code are we getting out? How many new things are going to production? To your point, how much rework is having to happen? So that's the quality. But one of the things that I think a lot of people don't actually measure is how does it make our engineers feel?
Yeah.
And this, well, isn't a hard metric, isn't a quantifiable. When we look at those qualitative metrics, those actually matter too. So I think when we look at what we call productivity insights, specifically when you're leveraging AI, it's like, great, are you gaining velocity?
Yeah.
What's your quality looking like? So we should see increased quality, increased quality, increased velocity, but then we should also see people are feeling better about what they're doing or how they're operating. And I think it takes those three levels. If you don't look at all three, I think you're missing part of the story.
Yeah, agreed. And we also often look at which is a little bit part of like how people are feeling or what they're doing. We often both ask questions or measure how much time people spend on things, right? And it's often quite revealing on like what do they actually end up like spending time on, like when you address that which is like not a productivity metric in itself, but it like signifies the amount of it's a way to measure the amount of toil and so on they have in there. And if we often look at what's and I think Google may have started like around inner loop and outer loop time, right? And like and how are engineers actually like spending the time on things, right? And you want them to focus on the actual like solving the problem at hand, the inner loop type tasks, right? But there will always be other things that you have to tackle around it. You always have to collaborate with others. You have to clarify maybe the requirements that were, not so well written, right? Or you have to do things around security requirements and so on, right? But I think having a lens on like how do we try to leverage AI for those like outer loop activities a lot more? Because to your point, I think so far in the last couple of years, as this this latest AI wave come in, a lot of AI has been focused actually on inner loop activities, right? And speeding up coding and so on, right? And it's there's nothing wrong with that, but I would perhaps say that that's not always like the highest impact area to focus.
I always reference it as if I were to use AI or if I were to automate a kitchen, I wouldn't, I would use the AI to take care of the prep and to take care of the cleaning because, if I'm a chef, I want to cook.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go and take the cooking part out first. Yeah. I would go and leverage AI to remove the worst part of people's jobs.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key differentiator on how you actually get adoption at an organization. I think that's how you gain benefit is truly focusing on those areas, like you were saying, that are all the things that I might not be as high of an expert in.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this gives us an opportunity to really double down on specialties where previously everyone had to know a little bit of everything and kind of deep in certain areas. I think now we can really start focusing on the things that we're phenomenal at, the things that we enjoy doing.
Yeah.
We talk about kind of a flow state with developers and getting into the flow. Like anything we do, it doesn't matter what project it is. If you have to leave it and go cook dinner or leave it and go help someone else, it takes that time to get back into it. The more we can remove that for people and allow them to stay in that situation, doing what they love, doing what they're passionate about, I mean, to me, that's when I get my best work done.
Yeah.
So I think that at least at Harness, that's our goal. Our goal is to remove the worst part of people's jobs, allow you to focus on what you're phenomenal at. And I think it's important too is empowering all the teams to actually work together.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've seen in corporate, and maybe this goes sideways and we don't have to go down this road, but we always had teams that were literally used as a beating stick for other teams.
Yeah.
Finance would come and, why are those servers on? Security, how come those vulnerabilities aren't there? And instead, how about having platforms that empower the teams to work together.
Yeah.
Right? Write policy so that you just can't do it wrong. Make sure you enforce up front so that I don't spin up servers that are too expensive. Instead of shifting the workload left, which I think is what we as an industry have done, we literally just said, hey, developers, you have to do all the work now. I think it's more about shifting the information left.
Yes.
So bringing it to the developers, bringing it to the engineers, bringing it to the people that are actually working on it when it's valuable, not 2 weeks later, not after it's in production, not a month later when I get the costs. I think it's about bringing that information left and making it useful now.
I want to pick up on that. I love that. I love the train of thought, because I think there's a few, we talked about this, there's a few concepts I think that have been around actually in the software industry for a while, but haven't quite played out, I think, the way we hoped, and I think now we're like. So one of those, I think, is the whole shift left concept, right? I think great concept. I think it's about accountability, about ownership. You should have developers kind of really own high quality code that gets delivered and so on, fundamentally, right? I don't think very few argue anything with that, right? I think when you go around, we both spend a lot of time with our customers and clients, and you see how it actually gets implemented. Many times it's basically dumping a massive workload onto developers who kind of just want to code, right? And they get all these different tasks, right? And which is often the sort of what happens here. So I think what we'll start to see now, I think, is, as you say, either information shift left, or you're able to have AI agents automate things. So at least what is the concept of broader ownership can be there, but it does not come with necessarily a massive additional workload. It comes with additional insights and so on. And one interesting example I saw is that with one client has put high emphasis around accessibility, for example, of their products when they build them. And previously that was had an accessibility team or a group that sort of looked at it after the fact, right? Now, so in the same spirit of shifting left, it's much better to think about those aspects of the user interface of the product and so on much earlier, right? But then what happened was that you add a bunch of tasks, right? And so they are starting to leverage AI a lot to analyze the product, for example, their interface. How accessible is it? Give it a score, give some suggestions in seconds, right? And now all of a sudden, this concept can be real, right?
Well, the burden's not as high anymore.
Yeah.
I think that was it. The burden became high. Setting those standards early on was a burden to the team. Leveraging AI to do that, I think that's genuinely where we're going to gain it. One of the things you talked about earlier, and when we've had conversations before, was about taking, say a PM, and almost giving them the superpowers to be a CEO.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking about that a little bit? I think
yeah.
it's an amazing kind of concept, and
I think it's another an almost analogous version of what the shift left in development, right? I think we've had, I would say, for several years, we've talked about this mini CEO archetype of a PM. So someone, like a CEO, looks at the whole product end to end and thinks about the performance overall, the financials about it, but also how customers enjoy it and so on. It's another one. It's a great concept. I don't think anyone would oppose to have an end-to-end view. I think the reality is, again, that it's very hard to find those. It almost becomes like a unicorn individual that you're looking for. That is this person who is, very strategic in their thinking, has great executive communication skills and can be out there, empathize with customers, but also deeply technical and can go into the guts of the product with the architects and the developers to really understand what's going on. At some point, you're sort of describing someone who's great at everything, right? And because of that, very few companies manage to have this archetype, and instead breaks it up into often multiple roles, or they try to do it, but many of the activities are not done very well, right? And I think, to this point now, AI, being able to use AI to actually simplify and free up some time to really do what the PM should do. So think about customer value, think about like what really like makes this product good to use and efficient and so on, rather than spending lots of time like gathering data or writing requirements and so on, and using AI for all those things that drive a bit of toil and extra work.
I think whether it's in the engineer, whether it was the PM, I think to that point we get back to where we were, which is allow people to do what they're phenomenal at, level them up, power them up, if you will, by, again, areas that maybe aren't their strong suit, or maybe they are, but it's something they dislike doing. Let things help you. If you look at it, and I think as a good CEOs are known because they build great teams around them.
Yeah.
They go and make sure that if they have a weakness, they fill it with a strength of one of their executives. And I think the same way we're seeing PMs do that. I found that correlation interesting because Harness has done something unique since we started. We've built a modular platform. Every module can be purchased separately. It doesn't require the other, one for the other. And we've done it in a way actually somewhat similar to the way you've described, which is each one has its own PM that owns that product. They're kind of the general manager or the CEO of that business. And so we run a startup in a startup model. They'll start with 6 engineers, right? And they'll build it just like you would a startup. And as you gain customers and as you get better insight to what that market fit looks like, now we'll scale it up and we'll push it, but it all sits on the platform. And I think, we saw similar things just in how we behave as a company.
Yeah.
I think it's ripe for the taking for AI and to literally level people up.
Yeah. I think there are your thoughts on this as well, but there's some also almost higher order implications that I think we'll see, or hopefully that we'll see in the software industry, for example. We always we want to create software that creates value very quickly for customers, and then also have a business model that is tied to that value. I think, but if you're being honest about it, a lot of software out there is often sold in pretty broad-based licenses and so on, that you would have to squint very hard to see that to argue that it's directly tied to the value that you're getting out of it, and that's often a result to sometimes just the fact that it's hard to instrument, it's hard to measure usage, understand where the value comes from. But I think it's also, and it's sometimes hard to gather all the data that you need to do that. So I think another thing that we're gonna see a lot more of is even sharper focus on kind of software realizing value for the customers pretty quickly, and business models that support that, even though that's sort of maybe a second or even third order impact of AI and software development.
I think we're seeing it already. People's evaluation timeframes, what they're evaluating for, also how quickly they're able to then change and switch to different tooling. To that point, if it's not solving a problem that is quantifiable, if you can't give value realization. So we can make assumptions all day long, but if we can't actually realize that value, what good is it?
Yeah.
And to your point, I think as we're getting into this, we have more and more tools at our fingertips. We're already seeing, and this is, again, how we operate. We make sure that we come up with, some assumptions, but we're going to go do an assessment to understand what that value is. But we have to come back with a realization. And if we're not driving value, why are we operating together?
Yeah.
And I think as business goes, it's easy to justify cost savings. It's easy to justify, I think people buy software for 3 reasons, and you can tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
They buy it to generate more revenue.
Yeah.
They buy it to save costs or to cut costs, or they buy it because there's some government or some governing body with security that requires it.
Yeah.
So it's either regulated and required, rev gen, or cost containment. And I think if you can't get to prove that, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And so I think, to your point, being able to show that quickly, this also helps power up the PMs and really allows people to embody it, because now they have access to that information. And to that point, it is even shifting that information left.
Yeah.
We're getting into the people when it's meaningful. We're gathering that data, where it would have taken, to do that task previously, you'd have multiple people that would sit there, kind of quants, working out what those numbers look like. And now it's become something a little simpler.
Yeah.
AI, we've talked about how it works technically, but this isn't just about technical aspects. This isn't just about the individuals and their specific use case, but it's also culturally. Like this is a change for businesses, how they operate. You see this, a massive amount, I'm sure. What are your thoughts on those organizational changes that we're seeing now that AI's kind of come to fruition to some extent?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we're very much in the early stages of really seeing like some big changes, because I think once we start, we talked a lot about taking toil out of the system and speeding up things, right? So you start seeing a lot of that, right? But if I'm, overall, if you go into a software development organization, today in 2025 versus 23 or 20 and so on, it's not very different. I would say, like, by and large, you have 2 pizza teams, you have like similar role setup, similar number of engineers in every team, and you have tech leads and so on. And you also have like this similar concept of a sprint and ceremonies and so on, right? And I think what it's going to become now, maybe this year and next, really important is like once you're starting to get AI deployed into more activities across that product development lifecycle, you're also going to have to start changing like that team setup, right? And I think some of this is forward speculating, right? But I suspect we're going to be able to see perhaps even smaller teams emerge, right? So you can have like we talked already about the PM's role expanding, probably. Maybe taking up more activities there. I think you'll be able to see a even smaller number of engineers in that team like achieve a lot more with AI and AI agents like supporting that. So you're gonna have to rethink maybe the standard role ratios and how the team is set up. I think we should also rethink the kind of cadences that we've gotten used to, right? And so if we're able to do things like in the moment, like a lot faster, but we still then like, work in the same tact, the same kind of cadence with the sprints. We do Friday reviews, or we do, Monday releases, whatever is the kind of standards that we've set. Until we start changing those, I don't think we're going to see like a dramatic change in the overall kind of performance of this team. So.
I think we see it across devs, like you said, PMs. What do you see in the operational world? Do you see any differences and changes there, or?
Yeah, I think we're going to see, if you take SRE for example, we're already seeing quite a bit of change there, because I think it's a great other role, which often, and I guess we just did it now. I was going to say we always talk about that after the fact, like, and so shame on us. But you have SREs. A lot of in a lot of organizations, what they do is often quite reactive, and you spend a lot of time like analyzing what went wrong. You analyze logs. You have other lots of data usually, but it's actually often complex to get under the hood of like what are the real root causes and trying to fix that, right? I think there are a lot of those activities that AI is very well suited to accelerate, right? And so what we're starting to see is SRE that is a lot more proactive, and actually instead of reacting to things after the fact, actually focusing much more on helping dev teams, provide them with tools that they can proactively notice issues and so on, and try to address them even before they happen, right? And I think that's going to be a big deal for a lot of our software clients.
2018, we came out to the world as the first software delivery company to build AI into the platform. Yeah. It was predictive, right? And I think one of the things we looked at was babysitting deployments.
Yeah.
And why do we have our best engineers, right, who know more about our code and know more about how we operate, sitting there babysitting deployments? And so we said, let's remove that worst part of the job. And I think at the core, what I found, whether it's operational, whether it's SREs and platform teams, whether it's, when we get into the actual development or the product side of the world, one of the things that I've found is that we've tried to orient around something specifically at Harness, which is make it easy to do the right things and make it hard to do the wrong things. And I know that sounds basic, but the cloud wouldn't exist if it was easy to make VMs at our companies.
Yeah.
And what we did is we put so many things in our way and we made it extremely difficult to do the right things. And I think one of the things we're seeing specifically is, people are empowering their teams by making it extremely easy to do the right things.
Yeah.
Get to production in 7 minutes. If everything's right, it'll go to production, right? If something's wrong, let's make it hard to do those wrong things. So if we're introducing security risks, if we're introducing vulnerabilities, if we haven't done our appropriate testing, let's, again, enforce policy that says, hey, hold up here before we go to production. Let's either get another set of eyes, let's roll back, let's handle it for you. And I think it's key that, and I know it's basic, make it easy to do the right thing and hard to do the wrong thing. But if we focus on that, especially the operational level, now it makes everyone's life easier. Here's your templates. Here's where those SREs drive massive value, saying, here is how you can get to production in a blessed way and in a way that is, everyone says it's okay, it's perfectly fine. And here's also all the guardrails put in place to make sure even if you do fail, it's okay.
Yeah.
It actually encourages people to go and test and try and fail because they don't have to worry about the ramifications.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's spot on. And it's another one of these, like, we've been on this journey for a few years now, like arguably, right? But I think we're going to see like a real acceleration now in some of these trends. I think you mentioned testing as well. I think it's another really interesting area, right? I mean, again, we've seen over the last few years, like many companies out here have, almost taken away like the role of testers, right? And actually made that a responsibility of development.
We've shifted that workload left.
Shifted the workload left, right? And to our earlier discussion, I think a lot of that was a shift in workload and not just a shift in kind of insights and help, something that is helpful. And so I think that's another one I'm starting to see like more actual like helpful tools being used now. I also think there's another topic which will be tackled by a lot of software organizations now over the next few years, is around how to deal with the kind of nature of AI not being deterministic, right? And so we have like a set of testing paradigms that have been built up over a long time, assuming that, when what you test, like if you input the same parameters, you get the same results, right? And so everything we do from unit tests and onwards has kind of relied on almost that as an axiom, right? Now you're seeing, and I've had a lot of discussions with heads of product and engineering here around this in the last few months, where they all have their stories around how they've incorporated AI features into their products, and they occasionally produce unexpected results, right? Where it's, some kind of hallucination or just something else, and they can't replicate them, and so they try to use the same prompt or same input, but and that is part of the nature, non-deterministic, and I don't think there's like a great like just simple answer to that yet, right? But I think we'll see like a shift now in the whole testing space around how to in addition to like being able to do some of the testing that we did in the past, like in a much more efficient way. I think also now how do you deal with some of these new challenges that are coming up?
I think it's something we've seen with all of our customers, which is, okay, great. If you're leveraging Harness and now you've sped up every part and piece of it, what's that bottleneck? Yeah. And if you've sped up build and deploy and all the rules are put in place by that SRE team or by the security team, so we know it's going to production is going to be good, but then how do we test it? Yeah. And what happens when that UX changes? And we've been, at our core, we've been focusing on testing, whether it be, unit tests. Like if I change the gas cap on your car, you wouldn't expect me to test every electrical system. It wouldn't make sense. Now, the fuel system, sure. But yet I changed a few lines of code and I'm doing all 10,000 unit tests. So, thinking about it logically, making those correlations, only testing what we need. Also making sure that when we are testing, right, are we testing for those things? So now if we are using AI, are we adding extra chaos testing? Are we doing resiliency checks? Because again, it wasn't written by someone with all of the context that we have to the company. So test it for the extra resiliency, test for those pieces. But what our customers said was, great, now our UX changes, the UI changes, something. I got to do new X paths. I got to go redesign the entire test. That's a burden. And so even leveraging AI, like we are now in our QA assistant, say, hey, give me your intent verbally of what you want to test and let it figure it out. Again, take those worst parts of the job. To your point, that's exactly where we're seeing the market. It is, people are doubling down on it. And I think what you'll find is that as those bottlenecks, we're going to progressively get faster in everything we do. If we do it right, we'll find those bottlenecks, not as a negative, but then we'll go enhance them. And we'll just each one tackle them accordingly. And I think as long as you create that area where, like I said earlier, you can fail and it's okay. Right? You have the safety harness, if you will, pardon the pun. I think that's what then allows people to go and again, tackle those and not feel like they did it wrong in the first place. I think with all that we've talked about, some of the overarching pieces, I would actually categorize this as engineering excellence. I think for some companies, it means something different. We've built a collective around this of, non-harness folks getting together to define what good looks like in this arena. And it's constantly changing. And I think that's one of the unique things is that engineering excellence 2016 is different than engineering excellence now. Is that a fair statement or?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the way that we think about it a lot, we also often use, the notion of engineering excellence, right? And the way I'd like to think about it is to, I think we touched on this a few times, but like really an end-to-end system, right? I think the goal of when we're building software, like if I take a huge step back, what we're really trying to do is we have something we want. We have either a new idea, we have something we want to modernize, we want to add a feature, want to reduce tech debt. We have something we want to do that will make this better. And to be really good at this is about taking that idea and then getting it deployed with the customer in production or having that new piece of software actually running where it should. That's like the overall, that's what we're kind of trying to do, right? And to me, engineering excellence is about how do we do that in the best possible way, right? And I think that means that a few different things needs to come together. So it's certainly about having the right tools throughout that you use that, but it's just as much also then about having the right people, the right talent, the right teams working on this. And we talked a little bit about sort of how that is going to evolve or how we think about that evolving. Just as the way how AI is changing the tooling landscape and impacting that. And then thirdly and finally, I think really is about operating model and kind of ways of working. So we have to have different looking teams doing things in different ways using new tools, right? And I think that is like constantly evolving. And I think that is what engineering excellence is really about. And that certainly looks different today.
100%. No, I think as we go through this, it's always a moving target, to your point. But I think that's one thing that everyone I talk to wants to achieve is excellence. And it can look different at different organizations and it can be put together and bolted together. But to that point, when you get people doing what they love, empowering them to do what they love, operating together, and you can achieve that end goal, right? Shortening that time frame as we talked about, leveraging the right tool or person in the right area. I think that's truly what brings engineering excellence together. By the way, if you do want to join our engineering excellence community, you're more than welcome to join. I think it's an opportunity for people to really give feedback into what that means for their organization and have those good conversations. I'll tell you what, this has been a phenomenal opportunity, a great talk. I have learned a lot, and I hope the folks on the line have as well. Please stay with us. We've got a massive event coming up. Thank you so much for the opportunity today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Absolutely.